Hi, I'm Mark, this is Teacher Talk. In this video I'm going to talk a bit about the differences between A-levels and International Baccalaureate or IB. I've got a fair amount of teaching on both of these as a sixth form teacher in the UK. I've taught politics on both, so that's government and politics for A-level, global politics for IB, which I teach at the moment. I've taught philosophy for A-level and for IB. I've taught some other stuff as well. I've taught sociology and psychology as A-levels. I do teach now theory of knowledge for IB, so I have got a fair amount of insight into how they differ. All right, so I'm going to rattle through some key differences very quickly. Okay, so first of all, IB, you do 6 different subjects, 3 at higher level, 3 at standard level. But that's not all. You also have to do the IB core, which is you take a 2-year course called Theory of Knowledge. You have to do creativity, activity and service, something I've never actually been involved in, can't tell you much about. And you also have to do an extended essay of 4,000 words on pretty much anything you want to write about. A-level's much easier to explain. You just do 3 subjects. I say 3. A lot of schools and colleges ask you to at least start with 4, but 3 or 4 is the number for the vast majority of students. Okay, another difference. Subject choice, A-level. There's absolutely no limit. You can do whatever you want. If you want to do photography with physics and history, go for it, as long as your school or college is happy with it. But basically you can choose whatever you want, which means you can drop whatever you want. Whereas with IB, you have to choose basically one subject from 6 different pots. And those different pots are, I'm going to read this out, make sure I don't get this wrong. They are studies in language and literature, sciences, language acquisition, maths, individuals and society, and arts. So you have to do maths, you have to do a language, you have to do a science, etc. There's only one you can drop, and that's arts. And so you can drop that and do an extra one from the other pots, but you still have to do 6 subjects altogether. Okay, another major difference you must be aware of is that your grades overall in IB diploma will be a number with a maximum of 45, whereas A-levels you get a letter grade where A star is the top achievement and the lowest is E, and if you don't get an E you failed. One other thing to be aware of is there's a lot more coursework in IB. Every IB subject you take will have a coursework element, and you need to decide whether you're up for that or not. Okay, I'm just going to talk a bit now about the differences in student experiences of A-level and IB. As a student myself, I did A-levels, so I can't actually say from personal experience what it's like to be an IB student, but I've taught many students on both programs, and I've got a fairly decent idea of how the experience is different for students of both. Okay, one difference is that in A-level you're essentially writing your own curriculum. I mentioned before there's no limits to what you can choose, so there's no sense of someone above you saying, well, I think this is what you should and shouldn't do, you should do these combinations or not. So on the one hand, that gives you've got total autonomy over the subjects you do want to choose. But the other aspect of that is it also enables you to drop anything you want. So if you want to drop sciences completely, you want to drop languages, you can do that with A-level. Now, you can't do any of that with IB because it does have this overall sort of ideology of what a sixth form curriculum should be. So there's a bit more of a sense of it telling you what you ought to be thinking about and learning about as a sixth form student. So I mentioned in the previous section the 6 different sections of curriculum that you have to take. And it's also theory of knowledge is an important part of this. It sits kind of in the middle of IB. And IB has got much more of a sense of getting you to think about what are the connections between the different types of knowledge you get from languages, literature, sciences, and social sciences, etc. So theory of knowledge is a very important part of that. I've mentioned already that IB is much more coursework centric than A-level. You need to work out whether you think that's going to suit you or not. Coursework in IB gives you a lot more freedom to pick up and run with things that you're particularly interested in. So in global politics, essentially, you can take any topic you're interested in within global politics and base your coursework around that. One practical difference is IB finishes a lot earlier than A-level. Not only will your exams finish pretty much a month before A-levels, but also you'll get your results significantly earlier, which can help actually, in fact, with the process of getting a university place. Right, I also want to point out the fact that the way you study in A-level is significantly different, and I would say there's much more rote learning, especially in the subjects I've taught in social sciences, in A-level than there is in IB. So let's have a quick look at an example here. So if you're doing A-levels, you should definitely take a look at things like this. This is called an exam board specification. You can find this by asking your teacher what's the exam board, in this case AQA. Then just Google AQA, name of your subject, specification. You'll get a long list like this. No surprise, it's a long list of topics. It's a very long list of topics. And then what happens is, at the end of the course, you get an exam paper, which will look something like this. And it will have questions that will be based on exact specific bullet points, and basically you want to make sure you're ready to talk about every single bullet point on the entire course in a lot of detail. Now let's compare that. That's A-level, so lots of rote learning. If you don't rote learn, you don't put in the legwork of learning and memorizing a huge amount about every single topic, then you can't get the top grades essentially. Let's compare that to an exam paper from IB Philosophy. Okay, look at this quote here. I'm not going to suggest you read this now. You can pause the video obviously if you want to, but you don't have to. The point is, you're given a quote, you're not expected to have seen this before or know what it's about, but you just take it in during the exam, and then look at these 3 bullet points underneath here. Identify a central philosophical concept or philosophical issue in this passage that addresses the question, what is a human being? So it's saying to you, okay, you tell me, of all the things you've studied and thought about, what do you think you can apply to this? It's not saying, this is topic X, you must talk to me at length now about topic X. It's saying, no, you tell me what you can relate to the prompt source. Second bullet point, investigate 2 different philosophical approaches to the philosophical concept or philosophical issue you've identified. Again, tell me about something you've learned. Now, you've got to have a big body of knowledge. You've got to be able to have philosophical, in this case, content you can bring to it. But it's up to you what that content is. So for me, IB, now again, I don't know so much about maths and sciences, but social sciences in IB are much more open-ended, and they're much more designed to let you talk about what you want to talk about and show the knowledge that you've personally decided to acquire. Okay, just a few words on how I see the 2 programs being different from a teacher's point of view. So, first of all, this idea that A-level, you have these lists and lists of topics that you must rote learn in a huge amount of detail. For me, I think engenders a sort of anxiety, a kind of fear. First of all, you've got to get through all the content, and it's a huge amount. And then secondly, are students going to be able to deal with whatever happens to come up in the exam? And there's this big kind of tension, anxiety of, okay, what actually is going to come up in this exam? Obviously, that can go great sometimes, but also it can go really badly if it's a topic that your students are not feeling ready for, whatever. And I'm sure most teachers have a horror story or 2 about that. Now, I just feel that with IB examination, it's much less about trying to trip you up, have you definitely covered X, Y, and Z topics, and it's much more about, okay, show us what you can do. Again, this is more, I can only really say this is true for social sciences and things like that. I don't know maths and sciences. So what this does mean is that there's much more scope for getting your students to be enthused and learn about the aspects of philosophy or politics that they particularly want to. First of all, because of the way the exams are. But secondly, because the coursework element really does encourage students to take topics that they want to know about and are not set by the exam board themselves. So I just think IB is much more geared towards an overall kind of student autonomy, and you get to encourage students to go off in their own directions with it. Also in terms of what you do decide to teach with global politics and philosophy, for sure, you can choose things you want to teach. You don't have to, you're not dictated to by the exam boards. For example, in global politics, there is no mention whatsoever of any case studies. Students must have case studies, but you're absolutely free to decide as a teacher which case studies you want to teach. And that's similarly the case in philosophy. So there is some reasons why I personally do prefer the experience of teaching IB. All right, thanks for watching that. If you're a student choosing between A-level and IB, of course, it's crucial to look into in detail what the particular school or college you're looking at can offer. As I've said in this video, IB is my preference, but I'm sure there are plenty of people, students and teachers, who might prefer A-level. Please do give me a like, comment, or subscribe. It'd be great to hear if you have any thoughts on whether you prefer A-level or IB, especially if you're from a more math or science point of view, because I can't talk about that in as much detail. But thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.